Monday, February 11th, 1929, 11:06 p.m. The night smelled like rain and whiskey, like perfume and powder and the gunmetal stink of Chicago's underbelly. I pulled my coat tighter as I slipped down the alley behind the Blue Orchid, my boots skimming over wet pavement. The bouncer at the back door barely glanced up. When I rapped twice, he knew me, knew I wasn't here for trouble. Inside, the air was thick with cigarette smoke and sweat, the kind of haze that made everything feel softer, slower. The club was packed, men in sharp suits, and women in satin clinging to the stage, their faces tilted toward the man at the microphone. And there he was. Valentine stood under the soft glow of the stage lights, eyes half-lidded, mouth brushing against the mic like a lover's whisper. His voice was velvet and liquor smooth, curling through the room like something living, something wanting. But it was his eyes that got me. Even with 100 others watching, he always found me. He held my gaze as he sang, and the corner of his lips curved a little. Not enough for anyone else to notice, but I knew what it meant. I see you, Ray. You belong to me tonight. And I did. I let the night run its course. Drinks, laughter, backslaps, from guys who didn't know me any more than I let them. But when the club emptied, when the tables were bare, and the band packed up, I slipped past the stage and up the back stairs to Val's apartment. His place was small, but it always smelled like him, like pomade and spiced cologne and the faint trace of tobacco. He swore he didn't smoke, but I didn't chastise him for it. Val was sitting on the edge of the bed, still half-dressed, white shirt unbuttoned enough to show the curve of his collarbone. He didn't smile when I walked in. I shut the door behind me. Something was wrong. He looked up, his dark brows drawn tight. I had a dream. I smirked, shrugging off my coat. What, you finally dreamt about me naked? Took you long enough? But he didn't laugh. He stared at me, deep and serious, and I felt the warmth of the room chill a little. I saw you in the street, he said, voice quiet. It was dark, but I knew it was you. There was a flash of silver, a badge maybe. Then, he swallowed, shaking his head. Then a bang. You went down, Ray. I clicked my tongue, tossing my hat onto the chair. You've been reading too many old pennies your mother brought you. I ain't fooling, he said. I sat beside him, tugging his chin up so he had to look at me. His lips were soft, parted a little. It was just a dream, I said. Val held my gaze for a long time, something unreadable behind his dark eyes. Then he exhaled, slow and shaky, and let me pull him down onto the bed. He curled into me like he always did, face pressed against my chest, his fingers slipping under the fabric of my shirt, enough to feel the steady beat of my heart. I ran a hand through his hair, pressed a kiss to his forehead. His breathing slowed. I let sleep take me, not knowing that Valentine's dreams weren't just dreams anymore. Not knowing that this was only the beginning. Bootlegging wasn't glamorous, no matter what the club owners made it seem like. It was cold hands and long nights, waiting in warehouses that smelled like damp wood and stale beer, making sure nobody got the bright idea to skim off the top. That afternoon, I was sent to oversee a shipment. Something small, routine. Another piece in the North Side's game against Capone's crew. I spent hours standing around, watching barrels get loaded into the back of a truck, nodding at faces I half knew. Easy work, nothing to worry about. But when I got back to the Blue Orchid that night, Val was waiting. He was in the doorway of his little room, arms crossed tight, like he'd been standing there a while. His dark eyes pinned me the second I stepped inside. What were you doing by the warehouses? I stopped mid-step. The room suddenly felt smaller, tighter. I shrugged, keeping my face blank. What are you talking about? Val took a slow breath, eyes scanning me like he was trying to see underneath my skin. I saw it again, the dream. His voice was steadier this time, but the way his fingers curled around his bicep told me he was anything but calm. It's clearer now. The silver. It was a badge. A cop. Ray. I huffed out a laugh, more forced than I meant it to be. You ain't no mind reader, Val. He shook his head, taking a step toward me. I don't know what this is, but something's wrong, Ray. I can feel it. I wanted to tell him he was crazy. That was only a bad dream, that he should leave the superstitions to the old ladies who read fortunes in back alleys. But I didn't, because he shouldn't have known where I'd been. And yet, somehow, he did. And I loved him too much to push any part of him aside. I could never entirely dismiss my Valentine. The wind came howling in off the lake that night, slipping through the alleys like a warning. Chicago was colder than usual, and not only in temperature. Tension was thick in the air. Word on the street was that something big was coming. You could see it in the way men clutched their coats tighter, in the way conversation stopped when the wrong ears got too close. Our crew was on edge for weeks, but now there was a real charge to it, a feeling that we were all standing too close to the edge of something we couldn't see coming. Even Bugs himself didn't look too easy. I had my ear to the ground like any good hood, but tonight I wasn't interested in business. I wanted to see my Valentine. The Blue Orchid had long since closed when I slipped in through the back. Upstairs, the door to Val's tiny room was unlocked. That wasn't like him. I pushed inside and found him sitting on the edge of the bed, shirt unbuttoned, his bare chest rising and falling like he'd run a mile. He was staring at the floor, hands clenched together, his usually slicked hair a little out of place. He looked up the second I stepped in. Ray. That was all it took for something in my stomach to tighten. I shut the door. What is it now? He swallowed hard, then wiped a hand over his face like he was trying to scrub the dream off his skin. I saw it again. I sighed. Val. No, listen to me. His voice was sharper than before, like he didn't have time for my jokes. It was clearer this time. You were in an alley, cornered. You had nowhere to go. And that badge, the one I told you about? I didn't say anything. He inhaled shakily, eyes locked onto mine like he needed me to understand. I saw the number. The room was too quiet now. I shook my head. That ain't possible, baby. I saw it, he insisted. I saw the number as clear as I see you standing there. 1,347. I don't know who it belongs to, but it's a cop, Ray. His voice dropped lower, like saying it out loud was dangerous. You can't go out tomorrow. Please, stay with me. I clicked my tongue, trying to shake the uneasy feeling creeping up my back. Val, please. I'd seen Valentine scared before. I'd seen him nervous, jumpy. He was a smart guy. He knew what kind of men came through that club, what kind of deals were made in the back rooms. But this was something different. I should have told him he was being crazy. I should have laughed, kissed his forehead, told him to stop scaring himself. But the thing was, I hadn't told him about the warehouses, and now he had a badge number. I sat down beside him, my leg pressing against his. He looked at me like he wanted to shake me, to make me believe him. I cupped his face in my hands, brushing my thumbs against his cheekbones. You've been dreaming your whole life, Val. How come now you start seeing things that come true? His lips parted like he wanted to answer, but nothing came out. He didn't know, and that was the part that scared him the most. I don't know what this is, Ray, he whispered, voice trembling, but I know it's real. I leaned in, resting my forehead against his. You want me to hide under the covers with you tomorrow? I meant it as a joke, but it came out softer than I'd intended. I just want you alive, he said. A shiver took me, but I forced a smirk, forced my voice to stay light. I ain't dying over some lousy cop. Val exhaled through his nose, shaking his head. You're a stubborn bastard, you know that? I kissed him slowly, my fingers threading through his hair. And you love me for it. He didn't answer, just pulled me down onto the bed, holding on tighter than usual. I closed my eyes, trying to shake the feeling that his arms around me felt too much like a goodbye. The whole city was holding its breath, like everyone knew something was coming but didn't know when to duck. Bugs Moran's guys were on edge, checking over their shoulders, gripping their pieces a little tighter. Even the regular folk, bartenders, cabbies, shopkeepers, were walking faster, talking quieter. Word was, Capone had something big in the works. Nobody knew what, but everyone knew it wasn't going to be pretty. I tried not to think about it. I spent the morning running errands for the outfit. Nothing unusual, just keeping an eye on things, making sure no one got too bold. By the time I finally got to Valentine's, I was bone tired, but the second I stepped into his room, I knew something was wrong. He was still in bed, the sheets twisted around his legs, sweat sticking his hair to his forehead. His chest rose and fell quickly. His eyes snapped open the second I touched him. Jesus, Val. I crouched beside the bed, shaking his shoulder. What's the matter with you? He gasped, sitting up so fast he nearly knocked me back. His eyes were wild, darting over my face like he had to make sure I was real. The badge, he whispered, voice wrecked. The gun. Ray, there was blood. So much blood on the snow. I swallowed hard. He never dreamt during the day before. Valentine grabbed my wrist. His fingers were ice cold. We could go tonight, he said, desperate. Right now. We could be gone before morning. I let out a short, sharp laugh. Baby, you're crazy. He shook his head, gripping me tighter. I ain't crazy. You know I ain't. I tried to smile, tried to make it light, but it came out all wrong. I can't just leave. Val. Why not? He sat back, looking at me like he was seeing me for the first time. What's keeping you here? This city? These guys? Ray, they ain't gonna bury you with honors. His voice cracked on the last word. I didn't answer, because he was right. But that didn't mean I could walk away. Just, please, he whispered, voice softer now. Think about it. I nodded, because it was easier than fighting. He let go of my wrist, but the shape of his fingers stayed burned into my skin. That night, the Blue Orchid was packed. The place was buzzing, everybody drinking like tomorrow wasn't promised. Maybe it wasn't. Valentine took the stage like a man with a ghost on his back. He sang, slow and sweet, like he was telling a secret to every person in the room. His voice wrapped around the words, smooth as smoke curling in the air. Usually, he'd throw me a little grin, a wink, but not tonight. Tonight, he didn't look at me once. I sat at the bar, chain smoking, my stomach tight. I didn't believe in magic. I didn't believe in fate. But watching him on that stage, singing like he was already mourning me, I didn't know what the hell to believe anymore. I woke up late that morning, on St. Valentine's Day, tangled in Valentine's sheets, his arm slung heavily over my ribs. The room was dark except for the slivers of winter light slipping through the curtains. The whole place smelled like him. Jazz club smoke, cheap cologne, something warm and familiar. I should have been at the garage. That was the plan. Bugs Moran wanted a meeting, and I was supposed to be there. But something kept me in bed longer than I meant to be. Maybe Valentine's warmth. Maybe the weight of his words still curling in my brain. We didn't talk much when I left. He barely looked at me, just rolled over, pulling the blankets up like he didn't want to watch me go. I almost left without kissing him bye. And his touch was as tender as normal, his hands wandering over my styled hair. When I stepped outside, Chicago was different. It wasn't only cold, it was silent. The city held its breath, waiting. I skipped a bit faster when I realized how late I was. When I rounded the back alley, I smiled when I saw Bugs himself approach. Though a low guy like me didn't really have much of a place greeting a man like him. We made it to the back of the garage at the same time. Then, without warning. An explosion of automatic gunfire. "Tommy guns," I said to his stunned face. Neither of us needing any further confirmation, and both ran back the way we came. I tried putting in a call to the Blue Orchid to let Valentine know I was fine, but the operator was busy. By noon, the news was everywhere. Bugs Moran's guys were slaughtered in a garage on Clark Street. 7 of them lined up against the wall, shot down like dogs. The papers called it a massacre. I read the names twice. I knew them all. If I arrived on time, my name would have been there too. Valentine saw it coming. I wasn't superstitious. I didn't believe in fate. But that was something I couldn't shake. I should have gone to him, should have told him he was right. But I didn't, because that night I had one last job. It was supposed to be easy, a simple lookout, nothing messy. Eyes on the street while the guys handled business. I didn't ask too many questions. I stayed in the alley, collar turned up against the wind, trying to shake the look in Valentine's eyes from my mind. The city was still tense, nerves shot after the morning's bloodbath. I took a drag off my cigarette, exhaled. Calm down, Ray. Just another night. Then I saw it. The silver flash. A badge. The exact one Valentine saw in his dreams. My breath stuttered. This wasn't an honest guy, but one of Capone's. This wasn't an arrest, but an execution. The cop moved fast, reaching for his piece, eyes locking onto mine. I turned and ran. Footsteps pounded behind me. Val's voice rang in my ears. I tore through the alley, boots slamming against the pavement, breath burning in my throat. My mind raced. I can lose him. I know these streets better than he does. A hard turn, a sliver of hope. Then, bang. Fire bloomed in my side, hot and vicious. My legs buckled and I hit the ground hard, gasping. The world blurred, snow, blood, Valentine's dream. I tried to push myself up, but my limbs weren't listening. The sound of footsteps closer, now. Then another sound, faster, desperate, running toward me. Valentine. I didn't know how he found me, but suddenly he was there, dropping to his knees, hands shaking as they pressed against my side. His face was pale, eyes wild. "I got you, baby," he whispered, voice breaking. "I got you." The last thing I saw before the world went dark was Valentine's face, lit up by the street lamp, his lips moving like a prayer, like last rites. I came to in pieces. First, the scent of antiseptic, sharp and sterile. Then, the distant sound of voices, like waves crashing somewhere too far to touch me, light pressed against my eyelids, too bright, too white. I tried to shift, but fire licked up my side, pinning me down. A groan slipped out of me before I could stop it. Then, his voice, the deep, sweet hum of my crooner, my Valentine. "Ray?" Software shaky, like he'd been waiting too long. I pried my eyes open. The world blurred, then sharpened, and there he was, Valentine, hunched forward in a hard-backed hospital chair, looking like he hadn't slept in days. His hair was wild, eyes shadowed, hands twisting in his lap. I exhaled, let my head sink back into the pillow, heavy with something I wasn't ready to name. Valentine didn't speak, only watched me, like if he looked away, I'd disappear. I swallowed. My throat was dry as hell. "They got me in a damn corset or something?" My voice was rough, my mouth like cotton. He let out something close to a laugh, but it was thin, brittle. "You got stitches. A lot of them." I let my eyes close for a second. I could still see it, the alley, the snow, the silver badge, the bang. My blood staining the street. Valentine saw it first. I forced myself to look at him again. His hands were gripping my arm now. I swallowed past the weight in my throat. "Your offer." His brow furrowed. "What?" "The one you made," I said. "To leave. Is it still open?" Valentine stared at me. Something shifted in his face, like a door cracking open, like a man bracing for something he never thought he'd get. Then his lips parted, and he whispered, "For as long as you live." Then he cupped his hands over his mouth, realizing the commitment he just made so simply. I reached up and tugged at his arm so he wouldn't silence his truth. I gave him the biggest smile I could manage. "Yeah, for as long as we live." A breath left him, something close to a laugh, something close to a sob. His head dropped, his shoulders shaking. I felt his hand slide onto mine, gripping tight, grounding both of us. I squeezed back. We didn't need more words. We were getting out. I spent another week stuck in that hospital bed, learning how to breathe without pain, how to move without my ribs screaming. Valentine stayed, never more than a few feet away. He brought me coffee that tasted like motor oil, stole newspapers from the nurse's station, and read me stories in a low, lazy drawl. Outside, Chicago burned on without us. The cops were still making rounds, asking questions. Bugs Moran's guys were scrambling, disappearing into shadows before Capone's men could finish what they started. But none of it mattered anymore. Chicago wasn't ours anymore. Our tickets were bought. The night we left, the station was cold, but I barely felt it. I had one arm hooked around Valentine's shoulders, my stitches still pulling tight with every step, but it didn't matter. People stared at our familiarity with each other, but that didn't matter either. He kept glancing at me like he still couldn't believe I was there, like I might change my mind and slip back into the city that nearly swallowed me whole. I wouldn't. The train whistle screamed. The engine shuddered to life. We found our seats tucked into the corner of a car smelling like tobacco and rain-soaked wool. Valentine leaned in close, his fingers ghosting over my wrist. "This is it," he said. I turned to him, took in the face I'd memorized, the one I was finally ready to follow. "Yeah," I said, voice steady. "It is." The train lurched forward and we left us behind, hopefully for good.